Hello, everyone. This is Michael Bean from Foreo, and today we're going to be talking about leadership and teamwork simulations. The webinar today is going to last about an hour, and our plan for today is to review 4 different simulations. We're going to start with Everest, which is a very popular team-based simulation. It typically would take 5 players to play, and then we're going to transition from there to show a change management simulation that we have that is a single-player simulation. From there, we'll go on to review an IT leadership simulation called Cybersecurity that can actually be used for non-IT topics. It's kind of a general purpose simulation, doesn't require special knowledge to play, and is a combination of single and multiplayer. We'll explain that. And then lastly, we'll be covering a tool that we have for easily creating your own leadership and teamwork topics called Performer. It uses role-playing to do so, and it can be either single player or multiplayer. At the end of the webinar today, we're going to be talking about additional resources that are available for these simulations and tools to explain how you can get started on your own or try them out. And finally, what we're going to do is offer some time at the end, probably not too much, but a little time on Q&A because we have a lot to cover today. So here you can see the Foreo website. We're at foreo.com. If you go to products and then go to ready to run simulations, you can see a wide range of simulations that are available. We recently updated our categories on the website, but the category that we're covering today is the top one, which is called leadership and teamwork. And if you click on that, you can see a set of simulations that are available. And there's quite a few of them that are here just related to leadership and teamwork. I think we have over 50 or maybe 60 now simulations in our catalog. And obviously we can't cover all these today during the webinar, but we're going to be kind of highlighting, as I mentioned, 4 of them today. From here, what we do is jump in a little bit and talk about Everest. So I want to show you a little bit about how Everest works and how it can be used in workshops and things like that. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on Everest than the other 3. And the reason for that is that we're going to all the other 3 kind of have similar capabilities in them, and I want to kind of explain sort of the range of capabilities within Everest, but they actually also apply for these other simulations, even if they're single player or multiplayer, depending. But to give you a little bit of context at the beginning here with Everest, the way that Everest is typically used in a workshop is there's usually an introduction that's done by a facilitator. This can be either done online or in person, where a bit of explanation is provided within the sim. There's also available within the simulation a tutorial that the facilitator can turn off or on to make available for the learners as they're playing through the simulation. Then typically learners will prepare, they'll kind of learn about their role. So there are 5 roles in this simulation, which I'll get to in a moment. And they learn about what their role is, what their objectives are, and they also learn a little bit more around the climb and things like that, who the other players are, that sort of thing. Then typically learners will play the simulation in teams. It'll take about 60 minutes. Sometimes it can take longer depending on how the simulation's set up. You can also shorten it up a little bit by removing some features from it to make it a bit shorter. And then typically there's a facilitator debrief where the results for an entire workshop or class are brought together, and that's usually an hour-long debrief. So an Everest workshop can range anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. If it's used that way, it can be done online, kind of semi-asynchronously, or it can be done all in person. When it's done online, typically the team of 5 needs to be online together, but the rest of the class or workshop does not need to be. And I'd say, for most of the workshops that I've seen with it, 3 hours is kind of a standard amount of time for running the simulation. So as I mentioned, there are 5 different roles in the simulation. There's a leader role who plays the role of an experienced mountaineer. And broadly, the objective within Everest is to summit the mountain. There are challenges that the team faces as they're climbing, and there's individual objectives and information that's unique to each player too that needs to be shared effectively. So the leader is responsible for helping the climbers reach the summit and has some other objectives in terms of keeping the team together, that sort of thing. There's a physician who has a medical kit where the medical kit can be shared with other team members so long as they're in the same place on the mountain. So that if the team gets spread out across the mountain, then only the players or the climbers who are with the physician can share the medical kit. There's a photographer who has a deal where the photographer wants to take photos for a magazine and has kind of a commissioned to do so, so has an objective of taking photos during the climb as well as taking photos for the climbers. A marathon runner who's in great shape but has limited climbing experience, and an environmentalist who's concerned about environmental damage. There's these oxygen tanks. Actually, that's been in the press a lot recently. There's been a lot of discussion around that. Even though the simulation's been out for several years now, that topic has come up a lot more recently. And you know, the environmentalists would like to clean up these tanks that are left at Camp 4, just kind of below the summit. So the climb for Everest takes 6 days, and you start at base camp, and then you kind of climb day by day. And what happens each day is you can move up to one of the additional camps as you progress until you reach the summit. Because it takes 6 days and there are 5 steps to the summit, you know, what happens is people can, if they kind of continue up for each day, they can get to the summit and then get to Camp 4, and then, you know, it's assumed they climb down from there. Climbers can also stop for 1 day at one place and still reach the summit. So there's an opportunity for everyone to stop at one camp for an extra day if they want to, and still summit. If they stop for longer than 1 day, though, they will not be able to reach the summit. And, you know, sort of a key thing that happens within the game is that each day you can advance to the next camp. So you have a choice of advancing to the next camp, staying put, staying at the camp you're at, or if you want to, go back to the previous camp if there's some issue or emergency or crisis that's occurring. Climbing Everest is dangerous, and usually not everyone makes the summit. So in the game, it's typical that at least one and often all 5 players are rescued, so that there's no one who dies in Everest. If your health deteriorates for some reason and you can no longer climb, you get rescued and you return to base camp. And there's this high altitude helicopter that comes in and will pick you up and return you to base camp. So you will no longer be able to climb after that, but you'll still be able to communicate with the rest of your team. And actually, it's really important for players to still communicate, share information if they're rescued in that base camp, even if they get there. And this is one of the things that doesn't happen until later on in the game too. So it doesn't happen instantaneously. All right, let's jump in and take a look at, first off, what I want to do is show you what a workshop or class looks like. I'm going to share with you a short, like 2.5-minute video of a class that's running, and it has a little scene in it at the end where you can see a set of learners who are playing the simulation together. In this case, it's an MBA class, so I'll give you a little bit of a sense of what that looks like, and then we'll kind of jump into the simulation. Okay, so here's the video. I'm just going to play, like I said, just play a little bit of this for you here right now.
I've written many case studies. I believe in case studies as an effective method for teaching leadership, but I've always felt that there's more to just teaching leadership than the written case. And so, drawing on the fact that many other scholars and teachers around the world knew about my Everest work, we set the simulation on Everest, and we developed a series of challenging problems and decisions that groups would have to make as they climb the mountain. And that's really the setting for the simulation. And we can track objectively the results of that decision making and look at how teams fared in terms of how well they were able to work together, solve complex problems, share information, and the like. You each will learn about what your individual goals are. As a team, you're working to climb the mountain, but you'll have lots of other goals and objectives that you'll read about that are individual to you. And you will then have to make a series of decisions, both as individuals and teams, as you climb the mountain. So we used it with a group of first-year MBA students in our full-time MBA program. And the goal here, you know, they're through their first semester. It's the launch of their second semester. They've been working in teams. They've done projects. They've been learning about leadership. Took a great leadership class here where they studied team dynamics. So now is a chance to really practice some of what they've been learning and to reflect a little bit on how well their teams were working by going through this experience.
To be more detrimental to you than a marathoner at Camp 4, just because you're not used to it, or even a leader.
Let me look at the forecast for tomorrow. The forecast is -16 tomorrow at Camp 3, and if we wait at Camp 2, it'll get even colder when we go up to Camp 3.
No, that's just directly related to like.
That's true, but it was always best to have to go by himself.
The issue is, if he's not with me, he'll die.
Wait, just a second.
But you really inhale it. When we like to
What happened? Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
All right, we'll leave it at that. You get a little bit of a sense for how this game works from there. And at the end here, what happened is the student got rescued, and so he was kind of upset about that. And the reason I'd like to show that video actually is to kind of give you more of a context for what the dynamics are like for the team when they're playing a multiplayer simulation like that. You can see that the simulation, the computer simulation or game itself is providing the context for the learners to work together. And but a lot of the activity, a lot of the simulation activity is really that communication that's going on among all the players, you know, the climbers in this case, as they're working their way up the mountain. And so the simulation kind of provides this backdrop, and part of the simulation, part of the soft skills for a multiplayer simulation like this come from the interaction among all the team members that we have. All right, so from here, let's log in to Everest, and I'll show you a little bit of what this looks like. I'm going to log into a couple roles. I'm going to start off here logging in as one of the players, and at the beginning of this, there's a video that's available. This video has a real climber. It's about, you can see here, about 8 minutes long. It's a really good video, and I like showing this at the beginning of running Everest. So go through that full 8-minute video right before they begin playing, and often what I'll do is I'll set this up so this video is not available in the learner screens the way it is today, but instead available for the facilitator. And I'll kind of show it at the front of the room, play it for the 8 minutes, and then immediately have the students start. And there's settings that are available in here where you can control kind of what information is available to students as they're playing the simulation. But from here, there's a tutorial that's available. We've talked about the roles already, but it kind of walks through the different roles. I'm going to skip the rest of this tutorial right now. And here, I'm playing the environmentalist. You get a little bit of background information around the environmentalist role, and there's this backstory that the environmentalist has, right? And you know, one of the things you learn is that the environmentalist has this experienced acute mountain sickness before, and that might be an issue for that role. And then there's sort of a calculation that's used here for determining what the score will be within the simulation. So what we've done here is set this up where we're kind of in a different state in the middle of the sim. And you can see right now that we have someone who's been rescued sort of at the beginning of that camp there. And what we're able to do, I'm going to log in another role here. So this is another player. And I'm logged in as the physician here. And what I can do then is make decisions in advance. So there's role information that's available for the physician, different information. There's different day information about what's going on the mountain at this particular point in time. And then what I need to do is kind of think about what decisions I'm going to be submitting, you know, kind of round by round as we're progressing up the mountain here. And we also get information around health. You know, what weather is going on, and sea weather at different camps as we progress. And as you would expect, as you climb the mountain, it gets colder and colder. You can see hiking speed, and hiking speed can be correlated with the general health of your fellow climbers. You know, you can ask your climbers how they're doing, your fellow climbers how they're doing, and they might, you know, can tell you. Sometimes they might not tell you everything. They might choose to withhold some information and things like that. But you get a general sense for how well they're doing from the climb. And you can also get information around food supplies and things like that, what's kind of going on. And as the days progress, of course, you consume food. And so for each round, what happens is there's different decisions that occur. As I said, there are 3 challenges that kind of happen as you progress up the mountain that you need to make. So that's what the learners see as they're climbing, and a little bit of background on what the different screens look like as they're working their way up the mountain. There's also information that's available for facilitators. So what I'm going to do from here is log in as a facilitator, and you can see here an entire class of learners who are playing together. I think there are 27 people in this particular class, divided up into teams. Some of them have more than 5 players in a team, but many of them have just 5, like we talked about. And what we get out of this are team results. And these kinds of pages that where you see summaries of class results are available for all of the kind of ready-made simulations that we have in our catalog. So this is just one example, and like I said, because of the time that we have available, we want to get through these 4 simulations. I'm not going to show this for all of them, but you get it. But these kinds of pages are available, or similar pages for similar sims are available here. All right, so in this class, what we see is the 5 teams that are playing, and we see the results for those 5 teams in this particular class. And I'd say these results are pretty typical for a class where, you know, the best score we have here is 83% for team 4, so they did reasonably well. The next team is team 1. They also did well, and the reason I say that is team 1 was able to succeed at 2 out of the 3 challenges. Team 3 did okay too here. You know, team 2 did not do particularly well. They only achieved 17% of their goals, and they failed at all 3 challenges. So, and then one of the things we can do, there's a survey that occurs within the simulation where learners are asked to talk about or sort of respond to what they think their team dynamics are like. Like, do you feel like you're making good decisions as a team? Is this a team that you'd like to work on again? There's a question around, do you feel comfortable or speaking up and asking questions with your other team members, that sort of thing. And what we can do then is look at the results of those kind of aggregated survey questions by team and see if there's some correlation between team performance and outcomes here. So here we can see team effectiveness, where there seems to be some correlation among the best playing teams and self-reported team effectiveness, and also things like psychological safety. So psychological safety was reported highest by 1, which was a high-performing team, and lowest by teams 2 and 5, which were the low-performing teams, and so on. So different things here. Did you think the process was fair or not? Things. And this is useful for debriefing purposes, kind of talking about what happened during the simulation. There's more detail regarding the survey results where we can look for a specific team. So let's look at team 4 here. And we can see the survey is actually asked in the middle of the simulation and at the end. And you can look for changes in answers to those survey questions as it's progressed. What we tend to see is that high-performing teams tend to think they're doing better later on, whereas the lower-performing teams tend to recognize that they're not doing as well as they thought later on. So you kind of see a shift in the opposite direction. So those are kind of the results that pop up here. As I said, there's a lot of settings that are available. You can choose different challenges to share with students or learners so that there's an opportunity to kind of mix them up in different ways. And there's other kinds of capabilities or edits that the facilitator can do to kind of control how the simulation is going to work. Do you want those surveys used or not? Do you want to include the introductory video, or do you want to share it yourself? If you're working outside the US, do you want to use metric instead of the imperial measures for units in the simulation, and so on. By the way, there's also a chat available in Everest, and we originally wrote the chat. The first version of the simulation, we're on version 3 of the simulation now, but the first version of the simulation we wrote, you know, over 10 years ago. We thought the chat would get used for playing this online. So if you had a team of learners who was participating online, they would use the chat. And but what we discovered is that teams that are playing in person use chat extensively, and the reason for that is they like to have private side conversations, like 2 players among the 5 that maybe are sitting around a table together want to have a private conversation. They can do so through chat. So we'll see that happening frequently within the sim. All right, so just to wrap up Everest here, the learning objectives for this particular simulation are how to build, participate in, and lead effective teams. And how leaders can shape the team decision-making and performance in competitive and time-sensitive situations. So there's some level of competition that's happening among the 5 players in that they have these competing objectives, and that's one of the things that the leaders kind of work on to help resolve. A key thing, though, is this third point here, which is how opposing interests and asymmetric information, and by asymmetric information we have unique information by role, can affect team dynamics. And you know, one of the big objectives within the sim is this effective sharing of information among all 5 team members, and to focus on the unique information that each player has or each climber has, and not the common information that's held by all 5 players. And then lastly here, how teams and leaders deal with these trade-offs between short-term risk, task completion, and long-term team effectiveness. So there's things that you might want to do in the short term, meaning at one point in time on the climb, that are going to result in maybe a short-term better outcome. But if you want to reach that big, in this case, long-term outcome of summiting, then you need to make some trade-offs around that. All right, and if you have any questions about this, you know, feel free to type them in, and we can get to answering at the end. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move forward with change management as our next simulation. And change management is a single player simulation where you play the role of either a CEO or the director of product innovation at a company. It's a sunglasses company. And you, as whatever role you're in, either the CEO or this kind of mid-level role within the organization, are in charge of getting Spectrum to adopt a new sustainability initiative. So there's this goal of doing sort of more green manufacturing practices, as well as producing products that are recyclable, that sort of thing. And you have 96 weeks to achieve a critical mass of managers at Spectrum to adopt your initiative. 96 weeks, if you think about holidays and vacation times, means basically it's 2 years. So 2 years of elapsed time to kind of achieve your objectives within the simulation. Because there are these two roles, we kind of talk about how people can play with low and high authority. So the CEO is the high authority role, and the director of product innovation is the low authority role. And also within the simulation, there's different levels of urgency for the change. So we talk about as a high urgency scenario for the organization, where this is a change that may be regulated, that there may be new regulations that are coming out that require this, or this is just something that the organization would like to do, but isn't being compelled to it every time. And if you think about that combination of low and high authority and low and high urgency, that we create these 4 different scenarios that can be run within the sim, and some of them are easier than others. So if you have a high authority, as if you're playing the role of the CEO, and it's an urgent need for the organization, the change is relatively simple. And if it's a low authority, meaning you're kind of in the middle of the organization and it's not required to make this change, then this is sort of the hardest. So scenario 1 is the hardest scenario to run, and scenario 4 is the easiest. The change management simulation kind of has a similar structure to what we saw with Everest, in that usually there's an introduction, there's an opportunity for learners to prepare again, kind of think about what they're doing. They played the simulation, and they play this asynchronously because it's a single player simulation. And then there's usually a faculty debrief at the end. So kind of a similar range in time, but I say in general, this one's a little bit shorter. It tends to run around 2 hours or so, something like that. And this simulation is based on a framework from John Cotter. It's kind of a popular change framework where it goes through, unfreezing, changing the organization, and then refreezing with the new change initiatives in place. So you kind of go through this, creating a climate for change, and then engaging the whole organization, enabling them for the change, and then implementing and sustaining that change over time. So this is the Cotter framework that's being used for trying out for running the simulation. So let's take a look at that simulation, see what it looks like. Okay, I'm logging in now, and you can see in this particular simulation, I am in the middle. So here you can see me here in the middle of the organization, and it's easier to see that on this page, I guess. So, and my goal here within the simulation is to persuade all of these people to adopt this organizational change. And so far, I'm the only adoptee of it, right? So I've kind of progressed through all 4 levels on this, and I want to, get everyone else aware of the change, and then to adopt the organizational change. And you can see we're at the beginning of the simulation. Our goal is to get at least 18 out of the 20 people to adopt in order to be successful. That's again controllable by the facilitator, and we're currently in the mobilized phase of adoption. And we have a certain credibility. I have a certain credibility level at the beginning of the game right now that I can increase or decrease depending on what I do. So from here, what I'm going to do is just jump to decisions, and what you can see here there are 18 decisions that are available, or levers that we can pull, and these levers fall into different categories. It's not available to the learner what these categories are at the beginning, and that's usually saved for the debrief, but the learner is supposed to think about, like, when's the appropriate time to pull a particular level to achieve the organizational change and kind of move the organization through the change. A good thing to do at the beginning here might be something like conduct private interviews, so meet with people. And the idea here in the game is that you have other responsibilities that you need to do as well, and that those kind of will play out over time. So that means that I can meet with 4 people in 1 week in addition to my regular work responsibilities. And so it's going to take me a week to implement that. And there's some changes that are more time consuming. Like if I say I want to revise the compensation system for the organization, that's going to take me 12 weeks or 3 months. And if I do that, I can't immediately do it a second time right after. That would be terrible for the organization. So I have to wait at least 20 weeks before attempting to revise the organizational system again. But for private interviews, that's something I can do quickly, and I can do it again, you know, in a week or two down the road if I want to. And here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick 4 people out of the organization that I want to interview. I'll submit my decisions, and then from there, what I can do is advance through and kind of see the outcome for the decisions as we progress here. So let me show you the facilitator side for this as well. I'm going to give you a little bit of sense for what that looks like. And what's nice about this is I can show you a completed game. This is sort of a nice way to do this. And what I'm going to do here is limit it to simulations that are completed, and I can look at someone who's been successful. So this person was able to complete it. It got a critical mass of 18, and they played the high scenario. And so what I'm going to do is go in and impersonate them. And then what I can see here is sort of what happened over time. You can see everyone's adopted the organizational change. And you know, there are views of them, like the interviews that I conducted with people are available here. I can play a little of this video of the interview that I conducted, or that this person conducted with a team. And I have this
for the weekends. It's not that I don't enjoy my job, I just prefer it when.
So that was the interview that was conducted. And you know, for who you interviewed, you'll see these little dots that indicate that you've interviewed the person. And you can see, you know, this person was able to successfully get that entire team to adopt it and end up with a pretty good credibility score. And then after the end of the simulation, you see this level of organizational readiness and how Amy was able to progress the entire group of simulated characters through to the adoption phase. And this pattern actually is pretty typical, where you'll see, you know, a lot of organizational adoption happen quickly in the first few weeks, and then there's a lot of laggards. So it takes time to, especially resistors, to change kind of later on here to persuade them to adopt the organizational change. In addition, there are relationship networks that can be explored and kind of built on, and you can kind of see who's connected to whom. Like here we can see, you know, Newman and who he works with. He works with Orish and Pratt, but we can also see, you know, people who are friends with certain people within the organization. We learn about informal networks as well as formal networks that happen within the simulation. Okay, I'm going to move on from here to cybersecurity. So the cybersecurity simulation is a combination of both multi and single player. It starts off as a single player simulation and then moves to multiplayer. And the structure of this one is pretty similar, but because it has a combination of single and multiplayer, it has a few differences in terms of how the simulation runs. What we'll see is an introduction again, and then we give some time for learners to prepare. The simulation is pretty short in this case, so they're not playing as long as they did in the previous one, where they maybe play for 22 minutes, and it has a timer attached to it too. So it's kind of time constrained, and it's kind of the nature of this crisis event that's happening within the simulation. And then there's an opportunity for doing peer review, where within a workshop, there would be different peers who would review each other and kind of evaluate what what the individuals decided and get feedback on. There's an opportunity to kind of write a message to your investors to kind of talk about what happened with this cybersecurity event. And then the peers get a chance to review that. They kind of change roles at the end of the simulation and evaluate each other. And then there's a facilitator debrief of everything at the end. And that whole thing takes, again, around 1 to 3 hours to play here. So let's talk a little bit about this kind of more unusual structure where we're kind of combining the single player that we saw in change management with the multiplayer that we saw in Everest in an interesting way within the simulation as we're progressing. So the way this works is people will review each other, and you can choose how many people you want, how many reviews, peer reviews you want to do in the simulation. So you can do 2, 3, 4, or 5 peer reviews. And of course, the more peer reviews you do, the more feedback each individual learner is going to receive within the simulation from his or her peers, and the more time it's going to take too for running it out. So you kind of see how this is broken out here, where we have 3 players, and what's happening is they all take 5 minutes for the intro, 22 minutes to play the sim, and then they'll have 5 minutes at the end here for this peer review, where player 1 will review players 2 and 3 and receive feedback from players 2 and 3 as well. And player 2 will review players 1 and 3 and receive feedback from them, and so on. So you get a little bit of a sense for how that works, how that peer review kind of adds an element of learning from one another. And this is kind of the team-based aspects that we see in this particular simulation. So let's take a look at that in practice here. How does that one work out? So what I'm going to do is log in. And again, because this is kind of a semi-team-based one, I have to log into the different roles. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to person 2. And I need to go to IT leader and log in. There we go. And then lastly, person 3 here, because I'm playing a 3-person game, I'm gonna log in as the 3rd person. Okay, so now we're at it, but we're actually not playing the game, right? So we're kind of locked out of playing right now. And the way this works is the facilitator, which I need to log into as, needs to open the simulation for play and kind of create it here. So you can see right now there are 3 students who are logged in. I'm gonna set up a new run. I'm going to reset the current run here, get a little sense for the facilitators. And here's where I can choose how many peer reviews are going to happen. I'm going to leave it at 2 because I only have 3 people logged in, and that's all I can do for that. And then I'm going to open the simulation for play. And once I open it for play, can you hear me now? I'm hearing, okay, great. I think that may have been my colleague had some trouble with the internet, but I'm not sure if anyway, I'm glad it's still working, great. So now it's open for play and the simulation should be beginning. So if I go here to player 1, you can see begin game, and you can see the countdown has started here for the timer for the simulation. And I see someone's calling in. We have Ted Chandler who's calling, and so my phone rings and I answer it. The context for this simulation is I'm playing a CTO for the organization, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer, Jill Bradley here. I have some peers or colleagues that are here, and I also have a number of people who work for me. At the beginning of the simulation, I'm in New York, and I'm meeting with investors. My company, though, is based in Seattle. So right now it's 8:30 a.m. and the time kind of moves forward as the simulation progresses. It's 5:30 a.m. in Seattle, and I'm getting this call in from Ted Chandler on the team, and he's saying that we're under cyber attack, and he's kind of explaining what else is going on. There's sort of, a denial of service attack that seems to be happening with our company, and I need to deal with that. The fulfillment system has crashed, so we can't take orders right now. And we're also getting this weird email where we're getting, every second we're getting a new email that comes in with the subject line he, and it kind of repeats. It says he. And so, I'm wondering, are these hackers or not? And you say, well, we're definitely having a denial of service attack or distributed denial of service attack. And we're not sure what else might be going on. And Ted's kind of advocating for some things. We got to learn more. And now we get to the part where I need to make a decision. This is a branching style simulation where I can order emergency shutdown if I think it's time to shut down our ordering system completely and maybe reboot everything. Or I'm going to just tell Ted to keep gathering. So I'm going to go ahead and tell Ted to keep gathering information. And I'm at breakfast again in New York, so I order the meal check from the waiter, and I got to think about who do I want to call next. So now who do I want to get in touch with to learn more about what's happening? I could call the CEO right away, but from my perspective, that might be a bad decision right now because I don't really know very much other than Ted's information. I could call Amit Gupta, who's one of my peers. You can see Amit here. He's a chief scientist, and he might have some information for me. Or I can call Hao Wang, who's my head of IT security. So he reports to me. I'm going to go ahead and call Hao Wang and see what he has to say. And we're not going to go through the whole 17 minutes because we'll run out of time. Get a little bit of sense for how this all works, though. So here, Hao picks up right away, which is kind of surprising, but it's noisy in the background. And it turns out Hao's at a gaming club. He's been up all night doing a kind of a massive multiplayer game with some of his friends. And then I convey to him to how what's happening, and he's going to go in and use the VPN to kind of check in on things. And I ask him, should we reboot? And he says, don't do that, because doing so is going to make it impossible to diagnose, and it kind of goes from there. And you can see the level of information that's here is really intended to be something that a non-technical audience can absorb. So you don't need a lot of IT background in order to to run this, but it's kind of giving you general information around how do you handle a crisis and how do you gather information to kind of ascertain what's going on in a time stress situation. So we've already consumed almost 4 minutes of our entire 20-minute run here. And then I can kind of proceed from there and call other people. I'm going to stop there because you get a little bit of a sense for how it works already. And what will happen is this simulation will continue, until the countdown. And then what I can do is take notes as I progress and then make a decision around what I think has happened. So at the end of this simulation, what goes on, I'm going to kind of jump. I have another one that's sort of set up at the end here so I can show it to you. So this is one where the time is run out, and we complete a 2-question survey. And so we get some background information around what questions I'm going to be asked. And based on the information that I've collected and the people that I've talked to about things, I need to make a decision around what I think happened. And I'm going to say, I'm pretty confident that there were intruders and data breach. And I'm going to say, I'm going to rebuild the system. So that's going to be my approach for solving that based on what I think above here. So I'll submit my survey results. And then I'm asked to make a statement to the investors. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and say, we had a cyber attack. And our systems were infiltrated, but we were successful in stopping them. And this is pretty short. I mean, in general, there'd be a longer sort of communication to the investors, but I'm just going to leave it at this in the interest of time today. So I'm going to go ahead and submit my statement, and now I'm waiting for the analyst meeting. So now what happens is, as the facilitator, we can advance to this peer review piece that I talked about a moment ago, where now I can look at what other people have said. So the facilitator now has advanced to peer review, and if I go back to that previous player we were just looking at, we can see now we're in the analyst meeting, and I can see what other people wrote. So someone here, one of my other peers, wrote, "We were under cyber attack, but fortunately there was no data breach." So this person felt there was a different outcome in the simulation than I did, and then what I'm asked to do is kind of evaluate how accurate this is, and I can provide additional comments to the learner. And then, here's another one that came from another learner. This is the 2 that I'm doing. And I can evaluate this person as well and kind of say something about that and write comments. And then after I've done so, what will happen is the other players will do their own surveys, and I will receive review results from them, and I can use that in the debrief for the simulation. So let's take a little look at what the simulation is about and kind of the purpose of it here. So, the idea is to gather information, to investigate and diagnose, kind of weigh the likelihood of weighted hypotheses that are coming from different players, and then form conclusions about that in a crisis, in a sort of a quick crisis situation, and then ultimately make recommendations and actions. And there's a number of good practices that can emerge from the simulation around dealing with a crisis, specifically around IT leadership, but it can be thought broadly about crisis management. Is that you want to keep it rational, control panic and fear, avoid wishful thinking, and focus on hypothesis and try to treat this as in a rational way or a scientific way, I suppose. Preserve the environment for diagnosis. So there's this tendency within this simulation to say, we don't want to shut everything down, because if we do so, we're not going to be able to gather information around what may have caused it, and don't shut down things in panic as a consequence. You want to draw on your team's resources, avoid distractions, and keep track through notes of what you really know and what you don't know, not based on conjecture, but are real facts that you're able to gather. The learning of, then there's good practices too here in terms of the communication that we're providing in the aftermath of the cyber event. So after the cyber attack or cyber event is over, we're writing this communication that's going to investors. What do we want to say? We can evaluate that as well, and avoid saying scary words. Keeping it truthful. Avoid saying more than you need to. If you're saying things that are building on things that aren't maybe included in it, that's probably a bad strategy. And also avoid challenging the hackers to attack you again. That's sort of another key, to saying like the hackers will never win or whatever. See that occasionally. So those are good sort of best practices regarding how to deal with that. All right, for our last simulation today, what I want to do is share with you a different style of sim. It's a role-playing tool, and this is something where you can kind of set up your own leadership and teamwork framework. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how this works. It can get used for other things. It's not specifically for leadership and teamwork, but it often gets used for leadership and teamwork. And just to give you a little bit of sense for what this does, this tool is used for things like customer service and sales. You know, so those things aren't technical support. These aren't necessarily leadership issues, but several of these things, the things kind of highlighted in red here, are leadership topics that can be covered by using this role-playing tool. And this is a different style of simulation that we have. It has 3 different sort of modes in it. It has an observe and rate capability, which is really more, it's less of a simulation, it's more of just watching conversations that are going on among people and then scoring them. There's a single player version, and then there's pair play, which is multiplayer. And so we've seen, you know, throughout our sort of session today, we've seen different versions that have both single and multiplayer that are built into it. So let's take a look at that. What we're going to do today, we're not going to focus on this since this is less simulation related. We're going to focus on the single player, and then, you know, perhaps we'll do the pair play as well. We'll see how that goes today. All right, so I'm going to go to the simulation here and go to Performer, and I'm going to, oops, I have the wrong login. Well, let me fix that quickly. Okay, there we go. And so I'm logging into the simulation, and it's asking me for my name. I'll go ahead and put my name in here. And Amrita has kindly played this already for me. So this is, again, this is kind of a peer review structure that's similar to what we saw in cybersecurity. And so this is kind of set up with her stuff in here already. So let me go ahead and get this started here. Here we're starting off with a video of frustrated staff. So let me play this a little bit for you of what's going on with the staff, and then I need to respond to it. So let me play this for you.
Hey, thanks for coming in. I just wanted to chat with you about Paul for a second because we're having some issues, I guess he and I, about workload, and quite frankly, I just don't think he's working at all. Every time I pass his desk, he's on Facebook, he's on the inter-office chat, or he's in the break room, and I really don't know what to do. I could use some help.
Okay, so that's the setup. We have, you know, we're managing a team and we have some frustrated staff, and we need to deal with how we're going to handle this. And this one is intended to simulate a face-to-face conversation. And this tool can support different kinds of interaction. The most complicated one or sophisticated one is the face-to-face, but we can also do phone calls, where it would just be audio tracks, for example, and responding to that, or it could be text-based. So, but let me go ahead and respond to my colleague here and kind of talk about what's going on. And you can see I can record here, and I have an opportunity to record a couple times here, but I'm gonna go ahead and record. Hey, thanks for reaching out to me on this, and I understand that this is an issue, and let's get together and talk more about like how we can resolve this. I need to, you know, first gather information from, you know, from this person who's having difficulty, and then I'll get back to you, but I really understand that it needs to be resolved, and we'll do something soon. Okay, so that's my recording. And the intention with this recording, by the way, is to do it in a way where where it's more, in this case at least, it's more spur of the moment. Like I'm responding to her as if I were talking with her in a real situation. And now I can go back and play that video. Hey, thanks for reaching out to me on this. Okay, so there I am with responding to it, and I have one opportunity for re-recording. And the reason that we don't do multiple opportunities for re-recording here, it can be set up that way, by the way. If you want to allow people to re-record 30 times or 50 times, you can do so. But usually what happens is we constrain this where it can be recorded, you know, a couple times or something, because what we're really looking for is not the perfect response, but the response that someone would say at that moment when they're talking with a colleague of theirs. So I've got my response now. I'm going to go ahead and submit it. And now here's my video along with the video of the person who was just talking. I can go back and play my video again. Hey, thanks for reaching. And what I can then do is score against some KPIs that are available. And the way this tool works, by the way, is you as a organizer of, say, a teamwork and leadership event can include your own videos, which you can record, you know, on your phone, for example, with the, you know, recording off the camera on your phone, or just recording an audio clip from your phone, for example, if you want to do a phone-based sort of a phone-based conversation or something, and then include it here and kind of create your own kind of leadership and teamwork experience, I guess. But here we have these measures for integrity, knowledge, and compassion. I'm going to score myself initially. It's a nice opportunity for someone who's doing role playing to kind of think about like how they did and think about what they've written here. And now I need to write something. I'm just going to write a few characters to get this filled out. And then I can also provide thumbs up and things. And then in addition to scoring myself, I look at my peer. So here we have Amrita, who's kindly recorded. So let me go ahead and play Amrita's response to this same recording.
Hey Marissa, I think you need to focus on your own work instead of coming to me and complaining about Paul.
Okay, great. You remember the characters, is good, and thanks for doing that, Amrita. All right, so there's Amrita's response, and then what I need to do, I can award thumbs up if I want to Amrita. I can also then score her on these KPIs that are provided around how I thought she did on this response. And again, like the other one, it can be more than just one person. And here we did, for the purposes of doing this in a quick demo, we've just provided the one, but in a real situation, you can have multiple people that you get multiple reviews and receive multiple reviews from this. And once I fill this out, then what happens is I get feedback on how I did and what happened here. So Amrita was very kind to me. I think she gave me very high reviews for my response, which is unusual. But in any case, we could see here with this, I got the score in general. I can compare how I rated myself to how my peers rated me, and that can be done anonymously or not anonymously, depending on how we do it. You can kind of mix people together in different ways in terms of how they're reviewing one another. And then you can see here too around what Amrita did is kind of write in information here, which I didn't really do as effectively as she did for what needed to go. And I also achieved some badges here, and these badges really have to do with the level of rating, sort of the average rating that I received from my peers on these items. And then in here as well is this opportunity for kind of evaluating this. So from a facilitator perspective, let me jump to that quickly here. So here's the facilitator screen, and we can kind of see where we are. And I can look at results. If I look at the single player results for the exercise that I just completed, I can see the video again and see how different the scores that people received in the class, and also see the top results. Now in my class, it's not very interesting because I only have 2 students or 2 learners in my class. And because Amrita scored me really high on everything, I got the top result in most things, but Amrita did best on communication, which is great. But imagine instead of only 2 people in a class, you have 100 or 1,000, or we've even run this with 10,000 learners in it. You get a wide variety of results, but out of that large group of people, you'll have certain results that kind of percolate to the top as the best answers. And then we can kind of play these back. Then if I wanted to say, hey, this person did #1 in terms of providing the result that was best in integrity, we can go back and look at it and see the video and kind of play it for people. And in addition, what we're able to do is look at specifics of what's going on for individual learners. So if I want to look at player scores, for example, for a particular learner, I can see how one person did. Here's how Michael Bean did. Here's the recording that he did. Here's the scores that he received, and so on. And if there were more content here, we could add on to it even further. So let's go ahead. I want to show you the pair play of this, which is kind of the team-based version, and we're going to run through that, and then we'll wrap up. We'll have probably about 5 minutes for questions here. So what I'm doing here now is we're going to be doing more of a real-time video-based call. And this one is really more around answering a sales call, so it's less leadership focused. But again, it really is around plugging in your own content for making it work and give you a little bit of a sense for how this all comes together. So Amrita is going to give me a call in just a minute. By kind of going into the simulation, and now she's calling me, and I'm going to go ahead and answer the call, and I get a little bit of background about my role here. I'm taking a customer call. I'll say, yeah, answer here. Hello, welcome to Cabletown. How can I help you?
Hi, I'm Blake. I wanted to inquire about the services that your company provides.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help you. Thanks for reaching out to us. And I also see, some background information on you. I understand that you're a longtime subscriber to our service, so thank you very much for that.
Absolutely.
And do you know what package you might be interested in?
Can you give me more information about the
I guess that's a good
packages?
thing to do. So we have an advanced package that adds some additional sports channels that you might be interested in. And you can receive some discounts as a longtime subscriber if you wish to join that.
That would be great.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so there's our little call. I'm gonna go ahead and end it. And now what's happening is it's saving the media from the joint call. You can see it kind of works on both sides. And then what we get out of this is ability to score each other in terms of what's happened here. And also there's an opportunity for like coaches and other people to go back and answer it. So what I can do then is, add some information here around what I thought happened, and I can see the video, sort of the recording of the video that I have, and then again go through and do a kind of a scoring that's going on using these identified KPIs that would be happening here, and then write some things about what I thought went well or what went poorly, and then advance. And then what I'll get out of this is, after another person has submitted, I can see kind of how they scored as well within the simulation. So we'll wait for that to come through. So what's happening here is, Imrit is filling out that other side of it, and then we can kind of see the final score and things like that. But maybe in the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of wrap up things for today. So I did want to kind of share some information around other resources that are available for the other simulations. So we have teaching notes that are available for especially the 3 simulations that we started with. Just a second. Do you have your sound still on? Can you turn it on?
Yes, yes.
I'm getting an echo.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Okay, so we have resources available like teaching notes, trial versions that are available, intro slides that are helpful for introducing the simulation, as well as debrief slides. And then usually there are author videos available where the authors kind of talk about how to use and run the simulation. And of course, there are webinar recordings like what we're doing today. So there's all these resources that are available to help you if you want to facilitate the simulation on your own, or any of these 4 things that we've shared today. And if you're interested in getting a trial version or learning more about this, you can do so by reaching out to sales@forio.com, and someone will help you get a trial account set up. So it looks like we have about 5 minutes left, and I just want to check to see if there are any questions, Amrita, from anyone that was involved in the webinar today.
Will the webinar recording be available for the panelists?
Sure. So the question is, will the webinar recording be available after this is over? And yes, we will send a link. We're going to upload this video, and we'll send a link to it for everyone who's here today, so you can look at it afterwards or share it with colleagues if you wish to.
What are the models based on?
Okay, and this question is, what are the models based on for this simulation? And we did a webinar, I guess it was 2 weeks ago or so, on kind of 8 different styles of simulations. And this is almost a mini version of that, I guess, because we kind of covered different types and things like that. The models that are used here really vary by simulation. So some of them use a tool called SimLang. It's kind of a tool for building simulations. It also, we're using WebRTC, which is called real-time communication, web real-time communication. It's a technology that's embedded in modern browsers to let video work and things like that. So everything that I've shown you today, by the way, doesn't require any plugins. Even the video-based ones are just using this WebRTC technology for managing the video and things like that. But there's really a wide variety of different types of models that are underlying these simulations. And at Forio, we support something, I think it's about 10 different modeling languages. Some of you I know who are on this webinar today are system dynamics modelers, and we support different commercial simulation system dynamics modeling languages. We also support things like Excel, and Excel has become a very popular way for people to build models on our platform, and we use that as well ourselves. For the branching simulation that I showed a moment ago or earlier, that was the IT security one, where we kind of ask questions, you respond to it. There we used a modeling package called Twine. It's an open source tool for building interactive stories. And that's become a lot more popular recently. And we have a new simulation that we're working on right now, actually, that uses that technology. And we built, I don't know, 2 or 3 others, but it's relatively recent for Foreo to provide that kind. But in any case, sort of a long-winded way of saying there's quite a wide variety of different languages, modeling languages that are supported under the hood here. And I think for all 4 of the examples we shared today, each one of them had a different type of modeling language that was used for building it. Any other questions, Amrita?
Yes. Can you talk a little more about the pricing?
So the question about pricing for these simulations, if you go to our website, so a moment ago I was on that Ready to Run tab, and here you can see Everest, for example, which we were sharing at the beginning. If you click on it, you can see the pricing. So it's Everest V3, it's $150 per seat. What we charge for are the learners who are running it, not for the facilitators. So if you have an event with 10 people, for example, then it would be $1,500 for that event to run this simulation. And with that, you would get all this other sort of material to sort of be able to run it. There's a facilitator guide and things like that. And we also help out with getting you set up in the first run, where we'll kind of check out the account, make sure everything's set up correctly, meet with you to kind of talk about how the simulation is running and things like that. But in general, what you'll see here is that these simulations are $150 per seat. There is an exception with Performer, which is the last tool we shared, where you're building your own. That's really more of a platform, and there's a different pricing model on that. We can share. It's a bit more complicated, so it's hard for me to explain quickly, but it's kind of on a monthly pricing for that, for ongoing usage and things. Any other questions? Or is that it? That's it? Okay, that's very good. Well, we're doing well. It's just 3 minutes before the top of the hour, so we'll call it good for today's webinar. And like I said, we'll be sending out more information after this is over today, so you can see a copy of the recording. And if you have any additional information or if you'd like to see more details about any of the simulations we shared today, just email us at sales@foreo.com, and we'll be happy to set up an account. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.